Okay, welcome everyone. It is 6:04 on Thursday, March 25th, and I'm going to call the meeting to order, beginning with a roll call. Mr. Holmberg.
Present.
Mr. Taché. I can see he is logged in, but we'll circle back to you, Dick. Mr. Boudreau. I do not see logged in. Mr. Woody.
Present.
Mr. Mogul.
Yes, present.
Mr. Dombrowski. I do not see logged in either. Mr. Taché, can you hear us? Okay, well, we'll circle back. The first item on the agenda is citizen comments. As usual, we have a lengthy agenda, so I ask that you keep your comments brief. And I saw Mr. Treaster's hand go up first.
Brief is the key word, and it's always a challenge for me, as Nate knows. My understanding is you might be discussing kennels on farms. Historically, we had a problem with barking dogs on a farm once that truly disturbed the neighbors, and to such a degree that the neighbor complained to zoning and filed a formal complaint based upon the nuisance regulations and our zoning regs. If possible, I would recommend that kennels and the raising of dogs not be allowed on farms unless there is a tremendous amount of distance between the kennel and the property line. Just my observation. Thank you.
Mr. Treaster, just for the record, your address, I'm sorry, I should know it, but I've forgotten it.
10 Huntington Way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treaster. Ms. Parkinson.
Hi, good evening, guys. Appreciate all your hard work you've been doing. This is Karen Parkinson, 55 Rose Hill Road, owner of Rose Hill Farm. I've been a horse owner of the farm for 40 years. I've sent you my written comments. That's a couple pages. You may or may not have time to read them. I'm sorry for the delay in getting that out. I have three little points I want to say. I would request you review my attached letter in regard to revisions in the definition of use and activity. They are not equal in meaning. They're not synonyms and should not be used in the same sentence. Thus, the great confusion. A simple fix I've recommended in my letter is if the planning and zoning parties were so motivated to look at that. Number two, speaking for all the farmers, other than Angelina, who are working in their barns right now and cannot attend this meeting, that the minutes be more detailed and reflect the debate and the action for all of us to review later. Number three, I request a correction in the February minutes to include the chairwoman's response to my request for more livestock representation and the request for an informal meeting with livestock farmers. This was under new business. I hope you have time to read my letter. Thank you.
Ms. Parkinson, I think your letter may have gotten truncated. When I looked at it, it was only one page and it ended mid-sentence.
It should be 2 pages. I thought Deb got it set off. Okay.
Let me double check to see. I looked at it earlier today and it looked like it was truncated, but I'll double check. If it's not there, please resubmit it.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, hi, Allison.
Hi, Rosemary.
I have something. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good evening, Allison, and the committee members. My name is Rosemary Garska. I live at 10 Pleasant View, and I own Heritage Hill Farm. I have a couple of things that I just want to briefly say. I know at the last meeting, there was a question of horses being considered as livestock. Well, according to Cornell Law School, Meaning of livestock. The term livestock includes cattle, sheep, horses, goats, and other domestic animals originally raised or used on the farm. So horses are livestock. They are not an agritourism commodity. So, and then the next thing I have is the plan of the POCD in 2018 recommended that P&Z meet with farmers before drafting new regulations. What should have happened is there was a big rush. There should have been a pause. Meet with the farmers, see what they have to say, and go with what the POCD recommends. That would make us a leader and not a follower, rather than cutting and pasting from other towns. I noticed in 2018, I went back and looked at for zoning for farming. I came up with about 2 pages. I looked at the draft for the zoning, for the farm zoning that is what this committee is working on, and I think it's 14 pages. I would have to say that P&Z is trying to micromanage farmers. At the present time, the farm community is still under the April 1st, 2018 zoning regs for farming. I feel P&Z has not been following the regs and has been going out of their way to financially hurt individuals who are in the agritourism, even though they are still considered farmers. I'm done.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to approval of the prior meeting minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Yep. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second Russell's motion.
Are there any corrections?
Sorry, I'm just reviewing to see whether including your comments regarding the livestock farming. Would the commission like me to add a note to the minutes regarding the chair's comments about her past experience with livestock farming and the other opportunities that there will be for the public to have comment on anything that comes from this commission?
I don't have any objections.
Yeah.
Okay.
If the request is for detail, we're happy to add that in.
Sure. Yep. I can do that then.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes with that addition?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Mr. Mogul, I see you shaking your head now. Is that you're not opposed, or?
Did we incorporate Karen's comments into the minutes or not?
Her letter from this afternoon will be attached to this.
No, I meant earlier on, she mentioned that we didn't quite reflect what was discussed here. And livestock was one of them. In terms of horses, that was Rosemary. But again, she said definitive. Okay, all right, fine. I'm fine with what's going on here. That's fine. I see it now. Thank you. But I agree.
Okay, yeah, her letter from February 23rd is attached. Okay, hearing no objections, then we will move forward to the fun part of the evening. I'm gonna share my screen with some of the information that, with some of the information to hopefully answer questions that we had at the last meeting. Item number 1 was the state's definition of agriculture, which I copied from the general statutes. We had discussed pretty extensively last time that we wanted to use the state's definition. So is this something that I should just copy and paste into our draft? Or did anyone?
I think it's fine to copy it in. I have no problem with that. The only thing that we might want to do is add after it says section 11Q, just do an as amended, which kind of covers that, if the state amends that definition in some way, we adopt it.
So as amended would also reflect that we amended it. Leave it alone, and then as the state amends it, we can update it. Leave it alone. I disagree with the as amended comment.
That's fine. I withdraw it.
I screwed up the formatting there.
It's fine. The formatting doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
Anyway.
It's getting the content in here. No matter what, we'll have to do a massive cleanup pass on this.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that now.
I'll make it red. Okay, so that was that definition. Russell, did you have something?
There we go. Thanks for reading my face, because I'm struggling with.
I can only see a couple people because I'm sharing my screen and yours looked.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have a terrible poker face. I thought Liz had suggested a sentence at the end of this that we include all this, but then make something explicit to horses and horse farming to allow their use. I thought that was in there, and my apologies in my haste. I don't have that copy in front of me. I usually do. I hate to miss that, because it was an inclusive statement. It wasn't an exclusive statement about horse and animal husbandry. And I once again could be wrong, but I don't have it in front of me.
Her statement, I believe that the addition was for the, quote, for the purposes of these regulations, the term agricultural also includes the use of horses for riding, pulling, training, lessons, showing, and other similar uses, but only when such uses are incidental to the raising and or boarding of horses on the same lot. I don't have the reference information for that as to where that came from, but that it was the added line.
Yeah, I'm just trying to address some of the concerns we've heard in citizen comments, and I don't know, it seems like it seems pretty inclusive. I mean, there could be some language
it says at the top that agriculture includes the management of livestock, especially including horses and bees, which were the two.
Sure.
Okay. In Miss Parkinson's letter.
That's fine.
I don't have a problem adding that line in. I'm not sure.
I think it would be difficult to add that line in, because we do have horse shows here in Ledyard already, where people bring in horses from other areas. So we have that already as an activity here and use in Ledyard. I'd leave it alone, because you have, horses, bees, the whole thing is up there. I mean, it's not something we need to add to, unless,
Right.
If we reflect the state, how much more do you need to do?
Yeah, my goal is to keep things as simple as possible. So as folks were saying, it doesn't end up being more verbose than necessary. The second question, I think, Mr. Boudreau, you had asked about what our current regulations were pertaining to dog kennels. And so these were included. Ms. Burdick also sent along examples of a few other local towns. I included Montville and North Stonington and Colchester. After I had posted these, she sent me other examples as well that I didn't modify to include, because this felt like a sufficient amount of information, and I wasn't sure if we needed any more. if we
But
decide
do
that
have-
we need
do
to
we have
include,
regulations in place already in another area? It
what,
sounded to me like kennels were already regulated when we talked last time.
if you look, I don't, is my screen showing up where it says this section right here is what is current according to Ms.
Then we got it set. We got it covered.
Okay, yeah, that's why I'm not sure
Okay.
that we need to make that part of our agenda.
That's right. That's fine, Allison. Thank you.
Okay, are we in agreement? Okay. So we will not be discussing kennels tonight. The other question that we had was the definition of agritourism. Mr. Mogul provided the following resource as well as definitions from several states. Connecticut does not have, you know, an official definition that we could copy and paste. Agritourism is going to be, you know, an important topic coming up in our discussions of the regulations. So I think it'd be helpful to have a solid definition before we go on, whether that means writing it ourselves or picking a state to copy and paste and then modifying it. I can't see if you're raising your hand, so just pipe in with thoughts. Mr. Holmberg, you're engaged in agritourism. Was there a definition that you found to be, or Mr. Mogul? I'm not trying to pick on you. It's just, you know, you're in Ledyard, you guys are two of the people that I would think of first when we're talking about agritourism. So it makes, you know,
Yeah,
it makes
so
sense.
you have to, so bear with me at Allison and the other members of the committee here. I'm on my wife's computer, as I'm sure you noticed when Christine Holmberg's name popped up, which is a struggle enough. And then Allison's cursor is screwing me all up.
Oh, no.
You're sharing the screen, and I'm sorry, technological difficulties here. But I'm with you. I would just pick one from another state. I mean, this is a nice sampling. I haven't, it's just at first glance, I like Florida has like a little bona fide farm in there, which I think is an important aspect of agritourism. I would agree. And on the spot, I don't know, seems like short and simple is the way to go. I don't have much more to offer than that, honestly, right now.
Is New Hampshire in there?
Yeah, well, now I'm feeling self-conscious about my cursor. But
Oh, no, see, I'm still not muted. No. It's not it's your cursor is that I'm like, why is the cursor not moving? It's because your screen is shared. Sorry, this is beyond zoning. I was just like, oh no, it's not moving.
So yeah,
My
New
fault. There's
Hampshire-
nothing you can do about it.
New Hampshire seems to include glamping as well as, do we want to include that? And there's also a group out there that wants to use farms as an RV place. And do we want to include that?
No.
I don't either. I'm just saying, these are things that are out there in ag tourism. This needs to be looked at a little more carefully, but I would say make it as open and simple as you could. And then if things come to be negative a bit later, then we can modify it. But I think open and flexible at this point in time is the best we can do. We don't know where ag tourism is going. A lot of people include camping, glamping, RVing. I don't agree with those things, but they do in other states, as well as harvesting and doing the other things that you do on the farm. And you do provide a park-like activity, so it can be quite interesting. So there's all kinds of activities depending on which way you go. And we don't know, unless there's two of us, Mr. Holmberg and myself, kind of represent this sort of thing, and we do different things and in different ways. But we are not the only representative. If we look around to other places that are doing ag tourism, we should do that within Connecticut, because this is just an example of, as I said, New Hampshire, Vermont, Florida, they're all kind of interesting. But I don't know how they arrived at those points based on what. I'd like to know a little more about it. In which direction are we going? Again, I would say RVing, for example, is not something we want to get involved with. Glamping, the Airbnb stuff, no, thank you very much. It's just not something I associate with a farm, even if they're going to help you harvest. That's
What
fine.
about Indiana? Because theirs is pretty short and succinct, but also flexible. Visiting a working farm or any agricultural, horticultural, or agribusiness operation for enjoyment, education, or active involvement in the activities of the farm or operation.
So simple and open. Yeah.
I would stick, that's about as short and sweet as it can get. And I would stick that in as a placeholder just so we can move forward. And if between now and the next meeting, somebody has, gets struck by lightning with this amazing addition or subtraction, we can make those edits later. If that's okay with everybody else. I will say with respect to glamping, I did tours in the UK a couple summers ago, and that was a major revenue source for a lot of no doubt farms out there, that they'd have these little campsites. It was actually pretty cool. It's not anything we're planning on doing here at Holmberg Orchards, but it was done well, and it was done frequently. It was actually a really, really, really nice activity, and it was a real driver to like those little villages out in the middle of nowhere. So
I've seen it in Chile as well, and it's quite well done there as well. So I would say even on vineyards in Chile, for example, it was really quite nice.
Any opposition to this definition from the rest of the committee?
No, two quick comments. So that is almost exactly what is used in the proposed regulation for agricultural tourism. It's a pretty short one sentence. And regarding the glamping or camping, the zoning regulations do have existing campground regulations. And so, in doing that, at some point, we have to figure out how the existing campground regulations would interplay with something like this, but it would certainly be possible.
I think the goal was to have a definition, listed in the definition section, and sort of.
Well, no disagreement with that. I was just making a comment that that is very much in line with what the zoning commission used as a definition.
And I do completely agree with that, Allison.
Okay. That's all I had in terms of items from last meeting. So unless there's opposition, I'd like to move forward with section 8.15, the purpose. Come on, folks.
I'm typing. I'm trying to get longer minutes this time. So you gotta give me a sec.
As a fellow recording secretary, I offer you my condolences. Mr. Treaster offered a starting point here in his comments that the statement say to regulate activities on a farm and certain accessory uses of a farm that would otherwise pose a risk to public health, safety, convenience, and property values. So that was one item of public feedback that we had.
I mean, the point of any of these purpose paragraphs at the beginning of a regulation is really just to provide context so that someone reading it understands generally what is below. This is probably fairly long, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I liked what Mr. Treaster had suggested, because it's short and very specific in terms of um, regulating things that pose a risk to public health, safety, and property values. That really narrows it down, the concerns.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a restating of the purpose of zoning. I have no problem with it. Yeah.
Other comments? Keep what's here, or
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Nate. My puzzled look reading this was, I'm like, I don't want to say I don't see the purpose of it, but it seems kind of, I'm like, either one's fine with me. I don't really feel strongly one way or the other because it doesn't seem like it's changing a lot functionally. I understand better now its intent, but I'm not impassioned either way.
I don't think generally you should be impassioned by the purpose part of any regulation. I'd probably take, could you reread Mr. Treaster's again if you've got it?
yeah, I guess I'm leaning towards that because I can see portions of this where where it says that if the goal is preserving open tracts of open space, how do we navigate a discussion of a farm that is largely open space and not for agriculturally based economic gain when we're talking about wedding spaces or like, to me that kind of reopens the gray area there when we were discussing like what constitutes
But Silvestri is open space. I mean, in a sense, it is a type of farming. I've harvested our 90 acres 3 times so far, selectively, with different types of wood, different stone walls inside, different things in there that you can harvest. And we've planted truffles and other things, mushrooms, things like
well,
that.
there's no disagreement that forestry can be used for agriculture.
Is that what you mean by tracts of open space?
No, I was thinking of a parcel that's not used for agriculture but is still preserved as open space. Mr. Treaster's statement had said the purpose is to regulate activities on a farm and certain accessory uses of a farm that would otherwise pose a risk to public health, safety, convenience, and property values.
Well, that could be interpreted anyway. Risk to public health could be anything. Could be your drinking water. It could be anything. It's just what you have here in terms of 6.A is quite clear. Though it's verbose, but it's clear. Where the other one is sort of a regulation of, and then you have to like define each one, So it depends who's defining the issue.
I have a question at this point. I'm reading the sentence. Let's see. Ledger's farms are central to the community's rural image and overall value by providing many obvious benefits, such as providing tax revenue with little demand on town services. Now, the next bit says providing wildlife habitats and tracts for open space. I don't really see how that fits.
Well,
it may happen. That's all fine.
It can fit in this way, in that we have set up habitats for the white-tailed rabbit, for example, or transitional forest spaces for young deer and bobcat and that sort of thing.
But that certainly isn't something that would be regulated by this.
Correct.
By anything in a proposed 815.
But it is advocated by NRCS, for example.
Oh no, I got no problem with bunny habitat. It's more, I think actually, going along with sort of where Tom was going. If you get to the bottom of this, the last sentence is actually the purpose, right? And everything above it is kind of fluff.
So should it be removed?
No.
I think that last sentence is very similar to what Mr. Treaster proposed. It's short, it's sweet, and it says this is what this, the next page and a half of zoning regulations does.
I would, I think keeping things as short as possible makes it easier for farmers to read and understand.
It also limits things, but
I would disagree. A
Okay.
well-worded regulations can be short without being limiting.
I hope so.
And I don't think either way that either version of that, of the modifying the purpose, limits what this would be about. So I don't think that follows.
Yeah, I can't imagine a situation where by removing the first half of this statement, a farm would be limited by the regulations as follows.
Well, it does tie it back. The first component ties it back to the PCOD. We were talking about preserving towns, existing farms, and encouraging new farm activities. This is an activity that should be in the PCOD, and this is a bridging statement between the PCOD and these regulations. If we cut it out, then 10 years from now, 5 years from now, it won't be there. Excuse me, I missed your point. I'm sorry.
It's
I'd
a-
like to
I
say
think
at
my
this
point is that it's a purpose statement. It just should say the purpose.
Our place here on our 15 acres is a registered wildlife habitat, but it doesn't have to be regulated.
Correct. And that wouldn't change. By removing that statement. I'm not gonna fight for it. If this is how we want it, we can move on.
I mean, I think we should shorten it. You know, that's my opinion.
Well, I agree.
I think that as well.
I don't think removing this detracts from anything. It just more clearly states the purpose, and I think that the briefer we can be, the easier it'll be to read and understand.
So cross it out, and if you know someone volunteers a replacement sentence that's well worded to be included in here, we can consider including it.
Does that work for you, Mr. Mogul?
Give it a try. I just like the bridging to the PCOD, and I don't see it in other places. So this is one of the places it was. So
Okay. Statement B, agriculture is permitted in residential and commercial zoning districts as a principal use or in addition to any existing permitted principal use. I am wondering why this just doesn't say accessory use.
Because it can be a co-principal use.
there could be two principal uses. I mean, that's entirely possible.
Okay, so this is fine. All right. C, application requirements. The following things require a zoning permit and or commission review. Establishment of a new agricultural principal use as defined in 2.2.
Why? It doesn't make sense.
Yes, it does. To establish any use, you have to get a zoning permit. Right. In order to put a residential house on a residential lot, you have to get a zoning permit.
We're talking agricultural uses.
And that's why I first said for any use, you have to get a zoning permit.
Mm-hmm.
So Nate, to understand that right, so I don't have like 2.2 in here. Can you give me an example of say I purchased another 30 acres and I want to plant more orchard on it? Would this say that I'd have to get a zoning permit in order to do that?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. If it was 30 acres that was adjacent,
No.
So if it was, yeah, it's a little tough. So if it was an adjacent parcel, right? So it shared a border with the existing, with the existing orchard. I mean, I think zoning's view would probably be that since the two parcels are owned by the same person, they're effectively in the same ownership. If they weren't, if you purchased 30 acres that was on the other side of town, yeah. If that property wasn't already in use as agriculture, you would need to get a zoning permit.
If the parcel was adjacent, then it would be part of the tract of the farm. It would be included. It would have the same federal tract number. And it would be, I've already had this argument with zoning.
Yeah, no, I know that. I know how we worked with your property. And that is true of your property. It's not universally true. I'm just being cautious, and I don't want to say that all properties wouldn't necessarily fall into that same state. So I'm just trying to be cautious.
One tract of land, so.
And that's what I said is I think that's how it would be considered. Why don't we go ahead and ask our zoning official to get his opinion on that?
So, like, just to clarify, I'm not trying to like belabor this. I principally like really don't understand it. So if I bought 30 acres on the other side of town, and let's say it was a hay lot, and all I wanted to do was plant apple trees on that hay lot, according to this, I'd have to get a zoning permit before I could plant the trees. I mean, I'm not just running a tractor through that field.
So if it was a hay lot, it already had an agricultural use. So you would be continuing the agricultural use. So let's say you had 30 acres that was it was the back of a garage.
Mm-hmm.
Then yeah, you would need a zoning permit in order to start an agricultural use.
And a wood lot? What do you think of that? Sylvester is still farming, right?
Don't we have a right to farm in the state? That should squarely fit under right to farm. It seems like the Farm Bureau would be all over this.
So right to farm, right, has to do with the right to farm statute has to do with nuisance lawsuits, right? It doesn't really have anything to do with zoning.
Well, that's part of it, isn't it?
And there would be, there would be no grounds to ever refuse a zoning permit on a lot like that.
My problem with this statement is that I think that it opens farmers up to the potential of like overly onerous, like needing to share information. I mean, like, for example, we like had brush cleared on our property that, expanded our growing fields, and we took one field at our farm this year and we planted a tiny orchard in what was not previously that. Technically that would be both an expansion and a modification of an existing farm. I don't think that warrants me having to get a different zoning permit for our property. Would be my inclination. Again, this isn't about me. It's just an example.
No, I'd agree with that.
I mean, technically, like if I had given you, if my site plan had included, tomato growing, and then I decided I was going to switch to watermelons, this would open me up to needing to resubmit.
I don't think it would do that.
I agree, but I'm just wondering. Through potential repercussions of a statement like that.
Yeah, so I generally agree with you. I mean, I'm not sure that this is needed. Zoning in general, right, has the concept of when there is a site plan change that requires work, and when there is a site plan change that you don't need to do anything for. And so, I think that concept is sort of already a part of zoning law. And so I don't think number 2 does anything. I don't think it's particularly useful. And so I'd have no problem with getting rid of it. I don't think it probably opens you up in the way that you think it might, but I don't think it's needed.
In which case, I would still like to just strike it out then, if we can't, if it's not necessary.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm all for striking too. And if I understand one correctly, we should strike that too. To me, that I've been involved in agriculture in a long time, and I certainly put a question mark next to it, because I'm going to have to make some phone calls before next meeting on that. That just seems, it seems really onerous to be like, oh, I just bought a piece of woodlot and I'm going to turn it into a hayfield, and the first place I'm going to go is pull a zoning permit. That may be what other people have been doing for a long time, and I've been unaware of it, but I've been farming, generations, like that seems really exceptional. That was, my understanding was ag was always one thing you could do you could always farm it. You never had to really ask permission to farm it, and whether or not that was legal or not, it doesn't sit well in my stomach.
Yeah, well, let's follow up and get an opinion from the zoning official. I support that. And Allison, I've added that to my list of things to do.
Which zoning official is that? Langelina? That's the attorney, right?
I would ask our zoning official, who's Kyle Felice.
Kyle? Okay.
Kyle, okay.
While we're striking things out, would it be appropriate to strike out the first part of this sentence and then just have a list of uses that require a zoning permit?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you mean there.
I'm going to do it for the sake of it, but it's not permanent. The statement would just say,
oh, sure,
uses that require a zoning permit.
That's fine. Yeah. Or at least it's fine with me.
That's my suggestion. Because this doesn't actually list application requirements here. And maybe it needs to, but I think for simplicity, it would be easier if we listed the uses that require a permit and then the applications for that requirement separately. Would make it easier for, someone like me who's not a zoning guru to sort of understand, like, okay, well then, yes, I need a permit and these are the things that are required.
I don't think you need to be a guru to think that getting rid of the first part of that makes it better.
Construction of new structures on a property seems like a pretty straightforward zoning thing to
I
not
see a copy of accessory uses and activities in 8.27. I'm still looking for it in the regs here.
Well, hold on, we were still on number 3. Is this good?
Well, is that permanent structures or just structures that are mobile? A lot of structures don't have a foundation and they can be moved from place to place depending on whether they're used or the weather, the winter, the summer, that sort of thing. Like a greenhouse, for example.
I mean, essentially, if it needs a building permit, then it needs a zoning permit.
I think it's a bit too rigid. I think
that is just sort of how it works, though. Like, if you go to get a building permit at town hall, you have to get the zoning permit and you have to get Ledgelight to okay it. I think that the point of this sentence is just to, like, reiterate things that are written elsewhere in zoning in terms of adding structures to a lot. And I don't know what the town's standpoint is on mobile structures, so I would have to research that further in order to be able to have an opinion about what you're saying.
Well, I think the point of including that line is that if you are going to construct a new structure, you ask the land use department, and the land use department may say, yeah, you don't need a permit for that because of this.
Nate, the sense I get is that this isn't the time or the place, you know, in the regs to detail what would and wouldn't. So the question on that would be, where would an appropriate place be? Where would the CEO make that determination?
Well, so there are exceptions for very small structures. So, you know, and that applies both on the zoning side and the building side. And depending on what the structure is, there may be other regulations that apply. So really, this just says that a zoning permit will be needed, and there may be other regulations that apply.
It's been a source of conflict within the town, and I know in surrounding towns, as agriculture becomes more intense, and kind of where do you draw the line between what's a support structure, what's an overwintering structure, what's a structure, and it could be it doesn't seem like this is the time or the place, but it's probably a conversation for another day as far as, you know, when does an orchard with a hail net be turned into a structure versus not a structure. I don't consider it a structure, but somebody else may. It'd be nice to kind of get that, you know, on an even keel so that it's not ZEO to ZEO. So, but we'll talk about that in another section.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think, you know, we could discuss that when we get further in some of the accessory units and stores and that section. We might be able to add in a line about those sort of gray area, clear type seasonal structures. I think for now we should leave this line until we hash that out in further detail. Number 4, accessory uses and activities specifically identified in 827D 1 through 6.
Yeah, it looks like this is a numbering issue. So I think 827 D refers to the very next section in the regulation, but it looks like its number is 815 here. So just for clarification there, I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, and you know, I guess when I was reading through that, none of the things that were in that section seemed like accessory uses or activities, but maybe that's because there was that's the note I had written, was that none of these things are, because if we're looking at like agricultural setbacks, that's not an accessory use. Animal waste is not an accessory use. Public health code is not an accessory use, in my opinion. You know,
Isn't 815 about home husbandry though, according to this, according to the regs?
Can you scroll down a little bit further for me? Keep going.
oh, was it this section?
It's that. So that's what it's supposed to refer to. So yeah, sorry. Thanks for pointing that out there. Yeah.
Okay. Should I? So I should not, because I was just thinking that all of the like livestock and setbacks and things are you know, part of a farm. They're not accessory uses.
Yeah,
So
agreed. No, that 815E is what that should refer to. So no matter what happens, that should be updated.
8.15.E 1 through 6. Is that correct?
Yeah, at least that reference is right now, right?
I'm going to scroll down, even though I'm probably making you car sick, just to double check. Agritourism, activities, accessory dwelling units, non-agriculturally related uses, seasonal roadside stands and farm stores. Well, so now I only see 5 things. So at minimum, I'm going to change this.
Yep.
To say 1 through 5. Are we good with that? And then any other use or activity specifically identified as requiring a permit. What are you imagining that might include? Sorry, I'm just turning the light on.
Thanks. I was going to ask the same question.
It feels like CYA. I don't know that there is a specific. I don't know that it refers to anything specific.
Let's delete it then.
Yeah, I feel like there's no reason to leave that open for inclusiveness unless you can think of something, Nate.
Sorry, slow on the unmute. No, I think striking it for now, and if we discover something, it's easy to add back in. But I don't have anything specifically right now that would make any reason to keep it.
Okay. I'm going to keep going unless someone pipes up. So just because we have so much to get through. Agricultural uses, setbacks. This seemed to be like the biggest problem line. And Russell, you're making faces. Does that mean go back or keep going? I can't hear you.
In my view, the setback is unreasonable and unrealistic. What
And
it really, what it
That's
should
what
do,
we had dozens of letters about. So
it should talk about having good fences that are well maintained.
I'm just not sure that we need to include information about setbacks.
I agree with you fully. I think it should be.
So I mostly agree. So I can give some context there. So the reason that section is even in there is to have a conversation about buffering, right? Because anytime we talk about agricultural regulation, the question about how to do buffering is always brought up. And so that's the only reason that's in here, is to have a conversation around how to do buffering and things like that. Regarding the comment about setbacks, so setbacks for buildings absolutely should be a part of this regulation, right? That's a primary function of zoning, is managing that. But I agree with, striking A and B. I certainly never thought those would survive public hearing. The point of those is to have that conversation about buffering and how you best make sure that you don't have conflicts between adjacent uses.
Say that exactly just what you said. Say it again and put it in a sentence. In other words, before, talk about buffering. I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, how do you, and as Mr. Boudreau pointed out, fencing is a good fence is a good neighbor, makes good neighbors. So these things are very restrictive as they are now. I'd love to delete A and B as Nate pointed out.
My enthusiasm to delete that got in front of my ability to unmute here, thus the excited hands here, because I feel like if we just got rid of that, it's like the stars will align and everything just kind of, hopefully will just kind of calm down, because I got so much feedback about that line, and I would completely agree. Please just get rid of it so we can move on. I think it's unreasonable. I think the buffering is something that should be asked of a developer. I think if somebody is building a new house lot and there's a farm abutting it, this, again, I'm going to come back to the right to farm. I think that should be a burden put on the developer, not on the farmer. They should be able to graze within reason of a property line. I think 100 feet is not reasonable.
Is the 75 feet for a building or structure reasonable?
I don't think there's any reason why buildings or structures that don't involve livestock would need setbacks that exceed those for the underlying zone.
I agree.
Right. So if you have a barn for a tractor or a garage for a car, I think the setbacks can be the same.
A garage for a
I
car
completely
would really
agree.
be
We have setback requirements of front, side yard, and backyard. They're all in place, and I think we should stay with them.
So to say something like no building or structure other than a dwelling or display and sales area is permitted within.
We probably want to say something like the building setbacks of the underlying zone. Well, let's see, because what we want to say is we want to say the setbacks for the underlying zone are what we want to use, except where these regulations explicitly modify those. Because we do, for like farm stores, have slightly different setbacks. We actually allow them closer to the road and things like that. So I think that's what we want. Yeah, that's fine, and we can wordsmith
I
that.
was just trying to type as you were talking. But
Yeah, no,
I got it. Building setbacks for the underlying zone are
applicable.
applicable, except where the agricultural regulations explicitly.
I would actually just say, except where these regulations explicitly modify them.
Modify or allow?
Because it's not allow, right? It's modifying what the setbacks are for the underlying zone. So I think modify is probably right.
Good.
That was the best part of my day so far, Allison.
Happy to get that crossed off. I really wanted to, like, meeting one, do roll call, cross that out, and then move forward so that we can please the public quickly. But number 2, poop. Again, this 200-foot setback is an issue for so many lots that are wonkily shaped. This would require a lot to be at least 400 feet in square, basically. I think leaving it satisfactory to the director of the public of health just simplifies things.
I think bringing in the health district is a good idea. Might be overkill, but again, putting a 200-foot limit on where you put your manures or compost heap is a bit extreme. I can't see putting it on someone's border, but it's still very extreme.
So we should probably a follow-up question with the town on the term director of health. I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
not sure that's
the Department of Agriculture would regulate that, correct?
I don't know. I don't know if we mean ledge light.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I was like, we're like right on the same like heartbeat, because I was like, is there a way to do that without bringing ledge light into it? It'd be really nice if it's a town problem to be handled at like right at town hall. I mean, gosh, back in the day when we had a sanitarian, that would have been like ideal, just send Randy or whoever was the sanitarian at the time out to just kind of, hey, and because I see this as something that comes up acting on a neighbor complaint. That's basically you're given some padding there in case there is a fly issue or something that neighbors have a reasonable outlet to go to. And it seems like if it's neighbor to neighbor, it should be handled at the town hall. I just don't know who would do that. I mean, even if it's Kyle, could kind of come down and say, hey, there's flies everywhere. We'll get this cleaned up, or we're going to have to issue a cease and desist. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing. It'd just be nice to handle it inside the town if possible.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to bounce this question to Liz and say, hey, look, what we would like to do is how do we manage, this type of complaint locally? And, is that a function the town can do, or, does it have to be by legislation? I have no idea.
Well, the reason we got out of sanitarians is the cost. And the reason we went to legislate is because they could provide this service. And they had 2 or 3 types of levels of sanitarians. And we are regulated by legislate as a winery. Just because our customers can go to the ladies' room and fill up a glass of water, we have to have our water tested 4 or 5 times a year. So I don't think that, I think it's part of what we are paying for at Ledgelight as a town. I think it would be interesting to see if Ledgelight could do this or has done it in other towns. And if they aren't doing it in other towns, well then let's try and do it inside. But if they're already doing it, they already have a method. Let's look at that for a minute.
Our experience with Ledgelight is that they're very good at commercial spaces, but when they get off of commercial districts, restaurants, hotels, things like that, sometimes they could be conflict prone. They just gonna look at it, certainly a different set of eyes than the Department of Agriculture would look at. I'm not saying the Department of Agriculture is the right person to mediate that. I really think it should be somebody within town hall. But I would caution to use Ledgelight, just without disparaging that organization.
I mean, I think it's probably outside of what they typically are doing. But I think we should ask the question and say, look, is there something already in place that we're not aware of that could handle this?
Would the Department of Agriculture have someone in place that could address this? I mean, they've obviously had this question put before them before. And I'm sure Russ has some folks over there, as do I, we could ask this question of. Maybe others as well.
Yeah, let's add this to our list of things to research, and we'll come back to it at the next meeting. This is just a need more information before we can move forward thing, but I want to keep scrolling.
Yeah, I think we agree in principle, and it's just figuring out what the right
wording is. Yeah. Connecticut Public Health Code, nothing in the section diminishes the property owner's separate responsibility for addressing compliance with the keeping of livestock and the storage and disposal of waste. Good enough. The living quarters of livestock, poultry, and similar animals, the handling of waste must not create a public health hazard or nuisance. I'm not sure what similar animals really means. I mean, because we've defined livestock.
I agree. It's probably not needed. I think we have to keep poultry, right? Poultry's separate from livestock.
Not really.
But I think in the
all domestic animals except those usually kept as
yeah, there you go. Yep, I agree.
All animals shall be suitably and adequately confined or controlled at all times. Proper drainage. Number 7, any commercial farm. We kind of opted to get rid of commercial. So I would opt to continue that.
I'm not sure this goes here.
I don't understand why this isn't under the.
I agree. This is the accessory dwelling unit. I would cross that off.
Okay. Yeah, I put a question mark there, but just because I didn't understand how it fit in. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Commercial farm accessory uses. Again, I would like to cross out commercial, just farm accessory uses. Nate, you're giving side.
I just think, again, we got to be careful there. It goes back to, the discussion we had last time about making sure that we reserve these accessory uses for legitimate farms. That's my only concern.
We've defined a farm. We have not defined a commercial farm, was sort of the outcome of that discussion. to me, this is another one of those statements that has a lot of words and could more simply say things that require a permit.
Accessory uses require a permit?
That's what this statement is saying, that the below uses require a zoning permit and or commission review.
I don't agree with that.
What do you think? What do you think the statement is saying?
No, I agree with what you said. The statement says, I don't agree with the statement. In other words, I don't think it should be there. Accessory uses are by right. You should be able to do that.
So you have to again remember that a by right use still can require a permit, right? A by right use does not mean that it is just something that you can do without any regulation. And I think the confusion here is all that an accessory use means is that you have to have a principal use, which is a bona fide farm.
Well, it's a commodity. A farm produced commodity.
No.
Just a farm. You have to have a.
Yeah, it has to be a farm as defined in the regulations as a principal use.
All right, so they're customarily and incidental subordinate to the principal use, which is the farm. So I don't see that they need a permit if you already have a farm.
So saying that accessory uses are allowed does not mean that all accessory uses are allowed. In the same way that saying that accessory structures are allowed doesn't mean that there are no regulations on accessory structures.
Setbacks, etc. That's about it.
So, look, I mean, I kind of look at it this, I kind of go at this two ways. So, the first is that we can believe that accessory uses can be, so customary accessory uses can be allowed on a case-by-case basis, right? Which means that we has to be determined whether or not, based on the use of the farm, that particular accessory use is customary. What is proposed here instead is to put a broad stroke across a large class of accessory uses and say, they're all allowed. This is what you have to do in order to do them. And so, that's all this does is make a whole bunch of uses and say, look, these are explicitly permitted. This is, what we want permitted. This is what you have to do in order to start doing them.
Well,
just got some clarification on what Nate just said. You gave that in two parts here, like we could do this or what's laid out here. The first, you used we would determine. Are we using the we as the town, the P&Z, or the committee right here? Where would that determination be made?
It would be the P&Z commission.
Okay.
Yeah, because ultimately it's the commission that's going to say, yes, this proposed use is accessory. So accessory, it is, customary to the primary use because of these factors and requires no additional permitting.
I agree with that. They shouldn't have another permit after the farm permit.
But accessory uses are always particular to what it is, right? So a tasting room, for example, is accessory to having a winery, right? It's probably not customary to have a tasting room that's accessory to a vegetable farm, right? And so that's where it gets weird. And so that's why these regulations instead just take that whole class of stuff and say, hey, they're all permitted. This is what you need to do in order to do them. And so it's meant to remove that ambiguity.
Yeah, Nate, that's why I asked the question, because when I heard that I kind of keyed up on that. And I'm just as a way to what's the path of least resistance if you're proposing, well, in your view, it's to a citizen whether they agree with it or not, but in your view, either one's going to find yourself in front of P&Z. Well, you might as well have it spelled out so you at least have some hope and some path moving forward. That makes a lot of sense to me there. Whether or not I agree with it, I mean, it's still it kind of lays out a path forward rather than leaving it with that kind of open-ended hanging. If you're going to go to P&Z anyway, you might as well have a way out of it kind of thing, which this would spell out.
Yeah, and I mean, the other part is that, at least in, in this form that's presented here, there are lots of avenues where you don't need to come to the commission, right? That you short circuit needing to go to the commission. But yeah, the point is to remove that ambiguity where someone has to come in and make an argument for why what they want to do to the commission is, a legitimate accessory use that does not require permitting. Because I can say from the P&Z side, we don't really want to arbitrate that on a regular basis. That kind of subjective decision isn't fun for the commission either. And so it's not something that we really want to do.
Gotcha.
So, my suggestion was we shorten this. The following activities require a zoning permit and/or commission review.
Yeah, I got no problem with that.
Mr. Mogul?
Well, I can't agree with it, but looks like I'm being outnumbered here, but so I would leave it alone. But again, I'm just one amongst 4 or 5, so maybe that way, that's the way it's going to be.
I agree with that, Allison.
I just think it makes it easier to understand. Following activities require a zoning permit and/or commission review. It makes it easier for people to read through and figure out where they fit in. We can come back to it, Paul. Like, we're going to come back to all of this. We just need to get through it the first time. Agricultural tourism. Now that this is in the definitions, do we need to have a definition here that's a little bit different?
No.
So I would opt to scratch this so that it's consistent with the definition in the definitions. Yes? So a site plan review by the commission shall be required when agricultural tourism is to be conducted on any parcel 6 or more times in a calendar year, or when any agricultural tourism event may reasonably be expected to require parking on any single day for 10 or more motor vehicles used by agricultural tourists. Otherwise,
That's just not realistic at all. It doesn't float anyone's boat. It doesn't cash flow. It doesn't work. 6 or more times a calendar year. How about 160 times a year? 10 or more cars. How about 1,000 cars? I mean, we've been known to have 500 cars here.
So the only difference is whether you need a site plan review from the commission or not, right? So this is saying is that if you have a very small operation that does, that you're only going to have 5 cars at a time, then you don't need a site plan review from the commission. So it doesn't say that you can't do that. It just says whether you have to come to the commission for a site plan review or not.
It's just an awful low threshold. If you bumped it up a bit, it would make it a whole lot less problematic. So a lot of younger, smaller farmers to get involved in ag tourism and bring more people into Ledyard so that you can make some more money in Ledyard. In other words, more people coming in with disposable income, got to be a lot of help in Ledyard.
Yeah, again, as I say, there's nothing in here that says that you can't have more than 10 or more cars, right? It just says that if you have something that's really small, then we set a very low barrier for, hey, you don't even need to come to the commission. The other side of this is, any other commercial activity, any retail store that has, 6 parking spots is going to have to come for a site plan review. And so really all this says is, yeah, you're going to have to come and show that you have the room for those cars to park. They can get off the street, they can get back onto the street, and people can get in and out of them safely.
Well, I think the threshold is awful low and the cost is awful high for a small business. Let's say it is a small business like that. Basically, I would bring the threshold up to 20 cars and any parcel 6 times a year in a calendar. That's awful, awful low. I would say 60 or something like that, just because of cash flow issues and the cost of things today. I know you disagree, but
No, yeah, well, I guess I'm just confused, right? Because there's nothing in here that says that you can't have 20 cars. Right.
Correct.
The difference is that you have to sit down with a piece of paper and show where the 20 parking spots are.
Right.
Right. There's absolutely nothing in here that says that you can't do that.
Right.
And so that's why I'm confused when you're talking about, that, look, it's cash flow, it needs to be able to do that. I agree. It says that you can do that.
Well, it's a
It's just
reaction initiator. I would say that you would begin at 10 cars. It's just awful low reaction initiator. Could we up that number a bit and still make you comfortable?
The thing is that it's in line with other commercial activities in town. And so, the goal is not to make, this so special that, nothing has to be done here that you have to do for some other commercial activity. And so, I don't know, there's no magic number that's right. We use 10 because this is what a couple of other surrounding towns have used. And it's sort of in line with what other commercial activities would have to do when they were at this same scale.
Except farming is a seasonal activity, and it doesn't always have any cars at all. And you will have an issue where you have an awful lot in the summertime, but awful fewer in say November, December, January.
But from a zoning point of view, I guess, I would say that, look, if you think that you're going to have 60 cars in July, then you need to show that you can safely, get 60 cars off the road, and that you can do that safely. And I'm sympathetic that you're only going to have 6 cars in November, but we need to make sure that you can safely hold the 60 cars in July.
Mr. Woody, when you read through this, a couple of things that you said ago, you had said 10 or more motor vehicles at a time. And to me that, I only added that here so that I'd remember to ask about it. But to me, that does add some clarification because it's hard to know, if that's per day, per event, or you just have to have the parking for when you're expecting the cars to be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's the same as any other sort of parking regulations that we have, right? So, if you think of this, as a retail operation, we base, look, you are likely to have in a retail operation of this size, this many visitors at any one time. And so it is meant as an instantaneous time. So it's not meant that you'll have 10 cumulative cars in a day. It's that at 11 a.m., are you going to have 50 cars? Or are you always going to have less than 10? Does that answer your question?
I guess I'm just wondering if we could just add that in, because for me, if we're expecting 150 customers in a day, but no more than 10 vehicles at a time, that we feel confident about that, then that provides clarity. I feel like, or
so at a time was added, that wasn't in there?
I added that. I highlighted it. I added it while you were talking, and then I wasn't able to interrupt to bring it up. So this was an addition that I'm looking for support or denying. I mean, I can delete it. I just typed it in. But
I have no problem with it.
Allison, I always thought at a time was there. That was my understanding. That's how I read it.
That's how I read it too. So that's why I was.
I know
Yeah.
you all kept saying it wasn't there. I added that.
So
It's an excellent addition then.
I can pull up the original if you're doubting me, but
No, I don't care.
no, that was my so I read that as 10 parking spots basically, and I think Nate kind of had the same thing. Like, okay, you got a storefront, you got your 10 spots.
That's not how I read it. I read
no.
10 or more motor vehicles, and so I was thinking, well, for our business, we never have more than 10 cars at a time, but we easily see 150 cars in a day, and so what would that look like?
No, and I think when zoning would get involved, right, is when you had 10 cars parked on the side of the road outside, and then Kyle would come around and say, hey, you've got more than 10 people at a time. You got to come in for a site plan modification and show how to get those cars off the road.
Yeah, I don't think the town's going to employ a black helicopter that swoops down when the 11th car comes rolling in either. Like, I think it's more of you just kind of have to set some parameters. Because that was when I really sat down with this, and I was like, all right, like really dial in on that. I was like, wow, for 5 or 6 times a year, you could have a lot of people at your place if you're open from sunup till sundown. I mean, the 10 parking spots, really, I mean, 15-minute hold time, do the math on that. You could shuffle a lot of people through and take the perspective of an adjoining lot. I was like, wow, like that's a lot of activity 4 or 5 times a year that you could have on a property without, if I read this right, without any zoning permit. I thought it seemed pretty reasonable. I'm not super excited about having to get a zoning permit for our operation. I'll go on the record as that. But for this, I didn't think it was unreasonable. And I didn't read it as at the 11th, the 11th car, the town's going to come swooping in and shut you down. It was just kind of like, yeah, you start to get more than that. Probably time for a conversation.
So Nate, what would a site plan review by the commission look like?
So
because I think, maybe just for the purpose of the minutes, because the farmers are asking for.
So wait, you want me to explain what a site plan is and type it at the same time, huh? So yeah, I mean, a site plan review is you come in with a map of your property, right? If you're going to have cars coming in, you would need to show, hey, this is where the cars are going to enter off of the road. This is where they're going to park. This is where they're going. So you need to show where pedestrian traffic is going to go. So if people park here, it's because they're going to this store, or they're going to the pick your own orchard over here, or they're going to the vineyard over here. You need to show that kind of thing. If it's a retail, it's a farm store type thing. You would want to show how people are going to get into the store. So it's really, it shows all of those things so the commission can understand how that movement will happen. I think the implicit question that you might have asked is, what kind of documentation do I need to bring? And so to some extent, that's very case specific. So the zoning regulations have a long chapter on site plan review. And so what is needed for a site plan review, the documentation that you need to bring. And for any site plan review, if there is no good survey of the property, and what's being proposed is very close to survey lines or very close to property lines, you may need to get a new survey. In almost all of these cases, the zoning official and the commission have the ability to say, everything that you're doing is obviously well outside of any setback concerns that we would have. And so we don't need a more detailed survey in order to determine any of that.
I think we should put the regulations for site plans, or at least as how to do a site plan here, so that it's very clear to folks what the minimums are. You just described it. I think if that was, let's say, 3 or 4 sentences or 2 paragraphs, 8 sentences, it would be very, very helpful.
So the thing I want to be careful about is the zoning regulations specify everything that's involved in a site plan review. So if we want to include a reference here to that chapter, I've got no problem with that. What we don't want to do is maintain a parallel definition of what a site plan review is in this section.
Well, what initiates a site plan, the requirements, what initiates it, should also be stated in that reference sentence. It was
sure.
Right.
So the site plan review isn't triggered by that section, but so the reference would be after. So what we could say is maybe at the top of this, the following activities require a zoning permit and or commission review. All site plans should conform to chapter 6, I believe. Highlight that and get that correct.
Are there any unique site plan requirements for ag regs? You're saying they're the same as the others. You're not unique to ag.
Correct.
No additionals, no subtractions. Just
I don't require any in these regulations. It's something we can keep an eye out for as we keep going. I don't recall any. Because really the site plan section just lays out, this is what a site plan should contain.
Is
Well,
there a fee associated with a site plan?
Yes.
would we need one for, let's say, manure or a compost heap or something like this? You know, as long as
So-
it meets setbacks, do we need a site plan for manure composting, for example? Because that's been such an issue with setbacks and other things.
So you wouldn't have, there wouldn't be a specific site plan for something like that, right? I mean, one of the things that, that is important to happen, and we do this regularly when we do a site plan review, is someone brings something in and we will say, oh, hey, so, a good example is we get this all the time if it's a gas station or something like that. And you were part of these, Paul, right? Where we say, hey, are you going to do propane sales? Because if you're going to do propane sales, you want to go and mark that on your site plan now, right? So that it's there. So you've got that spot designated on your site plan. And then if you decide to do that in the future, you're already set. And so there is a lot of that where making sure when you present a site plan, it includes as much as possible. And it's a little bit future looking so that you sort of include that type of thing.
So that's sort of like a special permit then? It's not a, in other words, it comes off not a by right thing anymore. It becomes a, basically you need a special permit to do it. It's a component of a special permit to do the site plan. No?
So a special permit requires a site plan.
Correct.
Right. So in order to have a special permit will always require a site plan. A site plan doesn't mean that you have a special permit, right? So in a site plan review, the only things that we can consider are those that are explicitly in the regulations. So the commission has to act very narrowly on whether or not an application meets the site plan regulations or not. When it turns into a special permit, we have much more flexibility to bring in, generic public health and safety things. In a straight site plan review, we don't do that.
So just to be clear, what we're looking at here is that if a farm has 5 or fewer events in a calendar year with 9 or fewer motor vehicles at a time, they're not required to come before the commission. If they have 6 events or more, or 10 events or more, then they need a site plan. And but then when do they need a zoning permit?
So no, so the zoning permit is the lowest form. A
anything-
zoning permit is you go to the land use office and say, here's my sheet, can I have my zoning permit? A site plan review means you come to the commission.
Okay, so if 5 days or less, 9 vehicles or less, they can get a zoning permit.
Correct.
Anything more than that, they need a site plan review. So you can't do anything without anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's zoning, right? If you're instantiating a use, you have to get a zoning permit.
Okay. I think in my head, when we deal with our insurance company and that sort of thing, there's always a minimum threshold that you don't need. If I don't charge people to come to the farm, I don't need to be insured. Or if I don't, there's all these little nuances. So that's what I was trying to clarify there.
Yep.
You always need something.
It just seems a low threshold for the number of events. And the number of events are very small. It just doesn't, I know you're saying it's a threshold to initiate the site plan, but it seems awful low anyway.
So my thoughts as you're kind of talking through this and working on this is, in my mind, I kind of see this as like a speed limit, basically. You kind of have to have some sort of division there. And a lot of people are taking it as absolute, and it's kind of like a speed limit. I mean, your car doesn't shut off when it hits 70 miles an hour, but it's kind of good to have a cop on the highway so that we're all not doing 120. And there's, I think you kind of have to establish some sort of bar. I think this seems pretty reasonable, and it would just seem like, hey, town, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah, sounds good. Here's your permit, in and out of town hall. This starts to grow. Hey, maybe we need to look at this in just a little bit more detail. This is starting to be a lot of cars and a lot of people, but I don't think it's as absolute as it reads, where it's like, oh my gosh, you hit your 6 events and the sky falls. So that's just my read on it.
I
For
agree
us-
with Mr. Mogul, though. The 6 events seems pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
I just
from
need the justification for the car, the vehicle count, because like we're looking at parking spaces and I can see how that directly correlates to traffic concerns and neighbor concerns and that sort of thing. But the 6 events in a calendar year, I mean, that's one every other month.
Now, I would say 6 events in a month would be fine as an initiator.
I
But
think 6 in a month is a lot for a zoning permit that, you know, you don't have to check with anyone. Because I mean, really the point, in the ideal situation, the way this would work is someone would get their zoning permit. They would run this for, you know, a year and it would be successful. And they'd come back to the commission and say, hey, it worked. We're planning on doubling the number of events that we're doing next year. And so this is, you know, how we're set up to do it. And that's the perfect, you know, from the commission's point of view, that would be the ideal way that this would work.
But from a business point of view, that's just not really realistic. So the other thing is, well, never mind. It just seems to me that that's awful low. And 6, if you don't want to go 6 per month, how about 4 in a month, or 1 a week? It's about rational to cash flow it. Especially, remember, seasonal, agricultural is seasonal. You'll have 6 months and then it's done, usually. So this is why we want to bring in tourism here, because we're between the 2 casinos. We're just north of Mystic. There's a lot of people coming to this area. I went down to Mystic last weekend. It was wall to wall people. You couldn't get into anywhere. And that's true in Stonington now and Westerly. So here it comes. And Ledger should be poised to take advantage of that. It should make some money from that. Not be afraid of it.
Yeah, and my response is just the same. There's nothing in these regulations that prevent someone from coming in and saying, yeah, we know what we're going to do from the get-go, you know, and we know that we're going to be running, you know, four events a month for 4 months a year. And so we're going to come in right away for a site plan review and get that all taken care of. Really, all it does is it allows a really low entry of barrier for someone who isn't in that category. You know, it's the same answer I've had. You know, I don't have a different one. I know it doesn't convince you.
Not at all. Not at all. It just seems to me an awful low threshold, and it's not realistic in terms of cash flowing. I think it just costs too much money to get involved, and it's really a barrier, not a help, to get involved at this low threshold. So do we really want ag tourism? Let's get rid of some of the barriers. This is one of them. Let's get rid of it. Ask yourself, do you really want ag tourism in Ledger?
I'm feeling challenged by the ability to negotiate between the numbers 6 and 60. So I'm going to just highlight this because it's getting late. And we'll circle back to it. Just because we have such extremes here. And I'd like to try and get through one more thing before we wrap up. Activities. Events of limited duration. This seems a little confusing to me. I mean, I feel like by nature, an event has a limited duration.
By limited duration, do they mean that it occurs on a regular basis, or does it occur for 3 to 5 hours? What are you reading there? What do you sense? What do you see, Allison?
What I would read is that it's an event that ends, but I think all events end.
Sure.
Like that's just the nature of an event. Even college kids can't party all night. I mean,
True enough.
To me, this seems confusing. Either we set a duration, events of 5 hours or whatever, or we just get rid of it.
Are events on a farm incidental? Yeah.
So I think in some ways, activities and agricultural, as we've defined it, are a bit overlapping. And so, I think that we could explicitly include some of the uses that are cited in activities in agritourism if we wanted to. The intent of limited duration here is really intended as seasonal type things. So it's stuff that, goes on for, a week in September or something like that.
So that's not
But,
how I put it at all.
Otherwise the regulations for it are exactly the same as agritourism.
So Nate, I have some conflict with that. In that I thought I liked that they made a distinction between agritourism and like activities. That was something I thought, like, from the initial concept, that there should be a distinction made between events that can happen at a farm and have to happen at a farm. And I think that the kind of burden placed on the farmer should be less for something that kind of has to happen on a farm. Apple picking, something I'm certainly familiar with, is something that cannot happen without an apple orchard. And the fact that the kind of end use of these regulations is overlays directly is problematic to me. If there's a spot where we could up those times, up the parking spots, this might be a good kind of give back to reward or acknowledge that everything on that activity list really requires agriculture. I think it's a I don't know, kind of like a higher hurdle maybe.
Well, not festivals.
Well, good point. So that should probably go up above.
Even hay rides, like the majority of hay farms don't offer rides.
So could we rejigger that and make that work? Does what I say have any support?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Like, if we're talking about agritourism as being more event-based and activities as being things that are directly related to the sale of farm products, then that would be a clear distinction to make. But I think then that we should do some heavy modification to this, because then activities are not events of limited duration at all. They're activities on a farm.
Well, for example, we have an event, we harvest, we have volunteers come in to harvest the grapes. Then we have a pressing. In a week so after that, we have a crush, and then we have a press. So after the pressing, we have another group of people come in, and they all get purple, and they jump up and down in buckets of grapes and that sort of stuff. So it is an event, it is an activity, but it does also commiserate. It's in line with what we're actually doing. Now, it involves people it connects them to the farm, even though it's not really, it allows them to say they were part of this harvest when they have that glass of wine. So that's where they are. So getting rid of events, I don't think so. Those three things are events. And then we have a harvest event after that for the people who harvested, a dinner, a gathering, that sort of thing. So
to what? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so I was going to say, to what Russ was saying, so I agree with you, and I think there's an attempt to do that here. I'm not sure it's done horribly well. All of the stuff that's in here is like, by labeling them accessory to the farm. The intent is, these things are all directly related with something to do with the farm, as opposed to activities that are essentially related to the fact that the farm is an attractive place to be, and so, different from renting out the farm for weddings or for events or something like that, have no tie to the actual agriculture going on the parcel. And so I agree with that delineation being valuable. I think it's really hard to do. I'm not sure this does a great job of it, but I agree 100% in principle with what you're saying.
Well, I think I disagree with you about weddings and events, and that they are there to help us sell wine. In other words, they are accessory uses incidental to the primary commodity that we make here. It's called grapes, and grapes are made into wine. We use these events to
So
sell our product.
I'm not saying it can't be valuable to the farm, right? And that's different, right? The difference is that you could sell that wine at a wedding anywhere.
Yes,
Right.
and
So I think that's
outside permit to pour, which someone refused to sign. Mhm.
but
So-
that you know,
I think we're talking about, events being agricultural tourism and activities being those things that are directly related. On-farm sales, pick your own, retailing of farm products, farm processing operations, like those things take a raw farm product
No,
and
no. They also take value-added products from a farm. So the definition of ag includes sale of farm products.
it included
Yes.
on-farm processing.
Paul, this would be my perspective. If I was writing this and break down those activities, this is how I would see your operation. I think you can grow your grapes and you shouldn't need a permit to do that, in my opinion. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about now you're going to have the public out to help you harvest. You can't have you can't have a harvest without growing something first. So the harvest end of it should be an activity that you're inviting the public out to help you harvest. And it should be a pretty low burden on you to do that, if at all. It's just like, yeah, so for let's say 15 days, we're going to have 60 cars a day or 100 cars a day helping us harvest. And that should be darn close to a right of the land as we can possibly make it. To come back and be like, now we're having a crush festival, that kind of bumps you up into section 1. And as long as it's, you're not overflowing your parking, that still could be a pretty low burden. But you can do the two things at the same time. Like there's a lot of room here by just kind of filling out section 2 and working with section 1 here. Eventually, your business is going to be to the size where probably for section 1, the town's going to have some input on it. I know you disagree with that, but it just seems like you have both activities and agritourism. And it's, if we could kind of break those activities up, it might be a path forward. Now, that's speaking for myself, not speaking for the committee, but as you're describing your operation, I see that you have two things going on here. One should be pretty close to a right of the land. The other one, in my opinion, might need a little bit of a look from the town.
Right. So how can we rephrase this statement to make that more clear? I think that involves removing this events of limited duration and replacing it with activities.
I think
Events are agritourism. Activities are an activity incidental to agricultural use.
Well, so are events. I mean, you can have music at these things as well. You can have dancing at these things. People have been known to dance in buckets of grapes. It's happened. And not only on my farm, on other farms as well.
But no one's saying no dancing in buckets of grapes.
But you are saying no to music.
That would just be.
That's why the word events.
We're not talking about music yet. Like, we're not talking about.
Well, an event would incorporate, say.
But we're not talking about what's allowed for an event and what's not allowed for an event. Right now, we're just trying to get through what's the difference between agricultural tourism and an ag activity. That's all. Like, nobody's talking about music. Nobody's talking about dance parties. We're not trying to. We're just trying to make these two definitions clear so that we can set different standards moving forward and all be in agreement.
One thing I struggle with is leading with the word events. And if there is a better word other than events to describe an activity, it might help to kind of break it up. I don't know, to try to kind of, because it's not, I don't consider pick your own an event. It can kind of feel like it, but it's really kind of, whereas like a wedding, so, yoga classes seems more like an event than pick your own or CSA pickup for that matter.
Would you
I don't know
say,
if it's better if there's some wordsmith in there that would kind of help.
would you say activities are events of limited duration? I mean, in other words, define activities as an event, as a type of event?
So my suggestion might be to keep going through the remaining three and uses and see what we feel like isn't covered by those, and come back to it. Because I think we're spinning our wheels on this one a little bit. I like where Russ is going. I don't know how to do it.
Can we just call it? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Nope, I was done.
Can we just call them activities of limited duration for now instead of events and start to kind of move in that direction?
I agree with that. I think events is the wrong word.
I just still don't see why we need of limited duration. Why can't it just be activities? Activities on a farm incidental to agricultural uses, including but not limited to, and I would get rid of hay rides.
Why not?
Because a hayride is not incidental to harvesting hay.
But it is incidental to touring the farm and to see.
Right, in which case it would be agritourism.
That's such a tough one. Because I mean, think of Jones Berry Ferry there. There's times when you have to move people from point A to point B on the farm, and maybe hayride isn't the right word, but having some insulation against that, like, oh, it sure looks like you're doing hay rides. It's like, no, we just need to get.
Berry Ferry is not a hayride. I mean, they offer hay rides.
I know. I don't know how to. I know.
Berry Ferry is a ferry. It's it's field transportation. A hayride they offer as well. It drives in a circle.
Mm.
And you pay money to take a hayride, like on-farm transportation to a field for pick your own isn't a ride, it's transportation.
But right now, pick your own is included in the same section.
Okay, it's fine.
And I don't think festivals would be an activity either.
I disagree with that fully. Definitely.
But it's not incidental to agricultural use.
Why don't we use ag tourism for both of A1 and 2? Why do we need an activity versus an ag tourism? Why don't we pool them together? Forget about this.
Oh, you're not allowed to have that opinion because that was my thought. We cannot agree.
We can agree on certain things.
Cross out activities altogether.
I think we should revisit it. I think we should get through everything else and admit that we're not quite sure whether or not this works.
I think separating them is really, we don't want to. I mean, just putting it as ag tourism is probably more healthy and more inclusive. Let's say it that way.
I mean, if Paul and Nate are going to agree on something, then I don't think anyone else should.
Well, and I think it's worth, at some point revisiting Russ's comments about, look, the intention is to draw a line between stuff that is, directly, farm involved versus those that are more distantly involved, and make a really low barrier for some of those.
Right.
I'm not sure this does it, which is why I was kind of like, maybe we should just combine them.
Like, I wouldn't consider on-farm sales an activity. I mean,
I agree.
I think that's essential. If you're not selling product, then you're not farming. You just have a big garden. So, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, the stars aligned. Nate and Paul agreed. It's almost 8 o'clock. Should we just cut our losses for the night?
I'll leave it on a high note.
I have a legend report we could try a little bit later.
Because we're not going to be able to get through accessory dwelling units tonight. So I think we should just stop here.
Sure, that's fine. It's progress.
Yep, fine enough.
Okay.
You guys might like to know that my wife just told me she heard the peep frogs for the first time this year.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the wood frogs have been going bonkers the last couple of nights at my place. So yeah, the cat brought one back to the front step yesterday. So that was, and then he was really surprised that it tasted bad. So
All right. I think I have asked Kyle about that additional parcel tract of land thing, what he thinks about that, and then
Yep.
ask Liz.
Are you talking about merging the properties? Is that what you're asking him then?
That was back when we were talking about
yeah, an 815C1.
a new farm.
Yeah, some clarification on that.
Merging two like incidental properties. In other words, two separate units, but they're side by side, so to speak.
Or even like, what if I leased your farm, Paul, to grow vegetables on? Then how would that work?
I brought it up. If I scratch built an orchard out of a woodlot, would I have to, have a zoning permit? My interest would be just for clarification. The tree feller's dropping trees, and the neighbors are like, what's the Holmberg kid doing over there? It's just like, oh, I'm planting an orchard. Oh, he can't do that. What? Yeah, you have to have a permit. Excuse me? Like, it sounds far-fetched, but it's plausible. It's just like, my understanding is, no, if I own the woodlot, I can cut down one kind of tree and put up a different kind of tree. And I just was looking for some clarification on that. So
Yep. I'll send Kyle an email about that, and then I'll email Liz to figure out who the director of health is or what that job would actually look like.
Yeah, who would be responsible for dealing with those sanitation type issues?
Yeah, and also for some clarification about which chapter has site plan review information.
Yeah, I think it's 6. We just need to get, for some reason, my zoning regs are usually hanging around here, but they're not.
Yeah, I'll find that out and include that as part of the next agenda. But otherwise, please take the time to, I know it's really laborious going through all the public comments and cross-referencing everything, but it does make it go faster if you guys have ideas. I particularly wanted to mention that we're approaching the farm winery section, which is pending. And I just want to mention that anyone who has a winery should be specifically giving that some thought.
Well, you can take a look at zoning regulations in Stonington. They're very clear and simple. And what is a farm winery?
Yeah, if you want to,
what they're able to do.
If you want to send those over to me, I can attach them as part of the research document. It just goes faster when we have a starting point. It's so much easier for me to cross things off than to write them. So.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
There's Boudreau in a second by Mogul.
Yep.
And so I'll adjourn the meeting at 7:58. Thank you all.
Thank you. Nice work.
Cheers.